There is an old saying that a watched pot never boils. It is meant as folk wisdom about impatience, that when you stare at a pot on the stove, waiting for it to boil, the boiling seems to take forever. The saying is, of course, false in the classical world. A watched pot boils at exactly the same rate as an unwatched pot. The water molecules do not care whether you are looking at them. Your observation has no effect on the physics of the boiling process. The saying is about psychology, not physics, except that in the quantum world it is about physics. In the quantum world, a watched pot really does not boil. A quantum system that is continuously observed really does freeze in its current state, unable to evolve, unable to change, unable to transition from one state to another. The observation does not merely appear to slow the process, it actually stops it. The quantum state is frozen by the act of measurement held in place by the observer's attention with the same finality that a pin holds a butterfly to a board. The watched quantum pot does not boil. And this is not a metaphor, not an approximation, and not a trick of perception. It is an experimentally confirmed, mathematically precise, and deeply unsettling feature of quantum mechanics. This phenomenon is called the Quantum Zeno Effect, named after the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea, who proposed a series of paradoxes about motion and change that have troubled philosophers for 25 centuries. Zeno's most famous paradox, the paradox of the arrow, argues that a flying arrow is, at any single instant, motionless. It occupies a definite position. It has zero displacement during the instant. If time is composed of instants, and if the arrow is motionless at each instant, then the arrow is motionless at every instant, and motion is impossible. The arrow cannot move, because at every moment it is frozen in place. Zeno's paradox was resolved in classical physics by the calculus of Newton and Leibniz, which showed that motion is the limit of a sequence of positions as the time interval approaches zero. The arrow moves because its position is a continuous function of time, and the derivative of that function, the velocity, is non-zero even though each individual instant is durationless. Motion is real. Zeno was wrong. The resolution was so complete that Zeno's paradoxes were relegated to the history of philosophy, interesting as intellectual exercises, but irrelevant to the physics of the real world. For 2,000 years after Newton, no physicist gave Zeno's paradoxes a second thought. The arrow moves, the runner catches the tortoise, the mathematics is settled, and then quantum mechanics arrived, and Zeno returned. But in quantum mechanics, Zeno was right. Not about classical arrows, but about quantum systems. The Quantum Zeno Effect demonstrates that a quantum system that is measured at every instant really is frozen, really is prevented from changing state, really is held in its current condition by the act of observation. The paradox that classical physics resolved has been reinstated by quantum physics in a form that is more precise, more radical, and more consequential than Zeno himself could have imagined. The Quantum Zeno Effect was first described theoretically by the physicists Baidyanath Misra and George Sudarshan at the University of Texas at Austin in 1977. Misra and Sudarshan considered a quantum system in an unstable state, a state that, if left undisturbed, would naturally decay into a different state over time. A radioactive atom, for example, is in an unstable state that will naturally decay into a different element by emitting a particle. The decay has a characteristic half-life, a time constant, that describes the probability of the decay occurring in any given interval. The standard quantum mechanical calculation predicts that the probability of finding the system still in its original state decreases exponentially with time. The longer you wait, the more likely it is that the system has decayed. But Misra and Sudarshan showed that this standard prediction assumes something specific about the measurement process. It assumes that the system is not measured during the decay interval. If you measure the system at the beginning and then wait for the full decay interval before measuring again, the standard exponential decay law applies. But if you measure the system repeatedly during the decay interval, if you check, at frequent intervals, whether the system has decayed, then the decay is suppressed. Each measurement projects the system back into its original, undecayed state. And if the measurements are frequent enough in the limit of continuous measurement, the system is completely frozen. It never decays. The unstable state becomes stable. The watched pot never boils. The paper that Misra and Sudarshan published in 1977, titled The Zeno's Paradox in Quantum Theory, is one of the most cited and most discussed papers in the foundations of quantum mechanics. Its title was deliberately provocative. The authors were claiming that a paradox that had been resolved for 3 centuries was alive again, reborn in quantum mechanics in a form that was not merely philosophical but physical, not merely conceptual but experimentally testable, and not merely about the nature of motion but about the nature of reality itself. The provocation was justified. Because the Quantum Zeno Effect is not merely a technical curiosity about the behavior of unstable quantum systems. It is a statement about the role of observation in the constitution of physical reality. If observation can prevent a quantum system from changing state, then observation is not merely a way of learning about the system. Observation is a way of controlling the system, of determining what the system does and does not do, of selecting which transitions occur and which are suppressed, of shaping the trajectory of physical reality through the act of paying attention. The mathematics is precise and illuminating. In quantum mechanics, the state of a system evolves according to the Schrödinger equation, which describes a smooth, continuous, deterministic evolution of the quantum state over time. The evolution takes the system from its initial state into a superposition of the initial state and the decayed state, with the amplitude of the decayed component growing over time. A measurement collapses the superposition, projecting the system into either the initial state or the decayed state, with probabilities determined by the amplitudes. For very short time intervals, the probability of finding the system in the decayed state is proportional to the square of the time elapsed, not to the time itself, but to the time squared. This is the crucial mathematical fact. For a time interval dt, the probability of decay is proportional to dt squared, which for very small dt is an extraordinarily tiny number. If you measure the system after a time dt and find it in its original state, which you almost certainly will, because dt squared is so small the measurement resets the system to its initial state. The clock starts over, and the next interval of dt also has a decay probability of dt squared, and the next, and the next. The cumulative effect of n measurements, each separated by dt, is a total decay probability proportional to n times dt squared. If the total time is t, then n equals t divided by dt, and the total probability is proportional to t times dt, which approaches 0 as dt approaches 0. In the limit of continuous measurement, the decay probability is 0. The system is frozen. Misra and Sudarshan called this the paradox of the watched pot, and recognized it as a profound statement about the relationship between observation and physical reality. The observation does not merely reveal the state of the system, it constrains the state of the system. It prevents the system from evolving. It holds the system in place. The observer is not a passive recorder of events. The observer is an active participant in the dynamics of the system, a participant whose observations alter the trajectory of the system in a way that no classical force can replicate. The Quantum Zeno Effect was experimentally confirmed in 1990 by Itano and colleagues at the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Boulder, Colorado. Itano's group used a collection of beryllium ions, trapped in an electromagnetic field and driven by a radio frequency pulse that would, in the absence of measurement, cause the ions to transition from one energy level to another by applying a brief laser pulse that measured which energy level the ions occupied at varying frequencies during the radio frequency driving period. Itano showed that the transition rate decreased as the measurement frequency increased. At the highest measurement frequencies, the transition was almost completely suppressed. The ions were frozen in their initial state by the act of observation. Itano's result was a landmark in quantum physics. It demonstrated that the Quantum Zeno Effect is not a theoretical curiosity, but an experimentally real phenomenon that observation genuinely prevents quantum transitions. That measurement genuinely freezes quantum evolution, and that the act of looking at a quantum system genuinely changes what the system does. The result has been replicated by numerous groups in numerous systems using numerous measurement techniques. The Quantum Zeno Effect is one of the best established and most thoroughly confirmed phenomena in quantum mechanics. Itano's experiment was not the only early confirmation. In 1997, the physicist Peter Kwiat and colleagues at the University of Innsbruck demonstrated a striking application of the Quantum Zeno Effect. They used frequent measurement to prevent a photon from being absorbed by an opaque object. By checking, at frequent intervals, whether the photon had been absorbed, they kept the photon in its unabsorbed state, effectively making the opaque object transparent to the photon. The photon passed through a barrier that should have stopped it, because the frequent measurements prevented the absorption process from completing. The observation did not merely reveal whether the photon was absorbed, it prevented the absorption from occurring. Kwiat's experiment belongs to a broader class of phenomena called interaction-free measurements. Measurements that detect the presence of an object without any physical interaction with it. The Israeli physicists Avshalom Elitzur and Lev Weidman proposed the theoretical framework for interaction-free measurement in 1993, and Kwiat's experiment was the first practical demonstration. The principle is astonishing. You can determine whether a bomb is live or a dud without detonating it, detect the presence of an absorbing object without absorbing a single photon, and observe the state of a system without disturbing it in any classical sense. The information is gained through the counterfactual, through the possibility of interaction that does not occur, through the path that the photon could have taken but did not. The measurement is performed by what does not happen, not by what does. This is the Quantum Zeno Effect, taken to its logical extreme. Observation can change the behavior of a system without any physical interaction between the observer and the observed. The mere possibility of observation, the mere existence of a measurement apparatus that could detect the system, whether or not it actually does, is sufficient to alter the system's trajectory. The observation does not need to exchange energy, momentum, or any other physical quantity with the system. It needs only to be possible, and the possibility of observation constrains the system as effectively as the actuality of observation. This result has a specific, almost metaphysical implication. The fate of the photon depended on whether it was being watched. The same photon, encountering the same barrier under the same physical conditions, would be absorbed if unwatched and would pass through if watched. The observation changed the physical outcome, not by exerting a force, not by transferring energy, not through any mechanism that classical physics recognizes, simply by watching. The physicist Serge Haroche, who received the 2012 Nobel Prize in Physics for his work on quantum measurement, described the Quantum Zeno Effect as one of the most dramatic demonstrations of the role of measurement in quantum mechanics. The Zeno Effect shows that quantum mechanics is not merely a theory about what we can know, Haroche wrote. It is a theory about what can happen, and what can happen depends on whether anyone is watching. The effect has been demonstrated in a remarkable variety of systems. In 2001, Mark Raizen and colleagues at the University of Texas demonstrated the Quantum Zeno Effect in the tunneling of ultra-cold sodium atoms through a potential barrier, showing that frequent measurement suppresses quantum tunneling, the process by which particles pass through energy barriers that classical physics says are impassable. The same quantum tunneling that we identified in our investigation of evolution as the mechanism that drives genetic mutation can be suppressed, frozen, prevented, shut down by the act of observation. If the DNA base pairs are being watched, the proton does not tunnel, the mutation does not occur, the watched genome does not mutate. The suppression of quantum tunneling by the Zeno effect has implications that extend far beyond atomic physics. In our investigation of evolution, we established that mutations are caused by proton tunneling in DNA base pairs. If the Quantum Zeno effect can suppress tunneling, then continuous observation of DNA could, in principle, suppress mutation. The genome that is being watched does not mutate. The genome that is left unobserved mutates at the rate that quantum tunneling dictates. The stability of the genetic code may depend, at the deepest level, on the degree to which the DNA is being observed by the cellular environment, on the degree to which the molecular machinery of the cell constitutes a continuous measurement that stabilizes the genome against the quantum fluctuations that would otherwise produce mutations. This connection between observation and genetic stability has not been experimentally demonstrated, but it is a specific, testable prediction of the Quantum Zeno effect applied to biological systems. And it raises a question that the contemplative traditions have been asking in their own language for millennia. Is the stability of the created world maintained by continuous observation? Is the persistence of form, the stability of atoms, the integrity of molecules, the coherence of organisms, the structure of the cosmos, a consequence of being watched? In 2014, Yoav Sagi and colleagues at the Weizmann Institute demonstrated the Quantum Zeno effect in a Bose-Einstein condensate, a state of matter in which thousands of atoms occupy the same quantum state and behave as a single quantum entity. The continuous measurement of the condensate prevented it from decaying, holding thousands of atoms simultaneously in a state that would otherwise have been unstable. The observation froze not just a single particle but an entire macroscopic quantum system. And in 2015, the physicist Kater Murch at Washington University in St. Louis demonstrated the Quantum Zeno effect in a superconducting qubit, the basic unit of a quantum computer. Murch showed that continuous monitoring of the qubit prevented it from transitioning between its two quantum states, effectively freezing the quantum computation. The observation held the qubit in its initial state with a reliability that exceeded any classical error correction mechanism. The Quantum Zeno effect is not merely a curiosity. It is a tool, a mechanism for stabilizing quantum states against decoherence, with direct applications to quantum computing, quantum error correction, and the construction of stable quantum memories. Now here is where the investigation turns from the technical to the profound. Because the Quantum Zeno effect raises a question that quantum mechanics has been struggling with since its inception. What constitutes an observation? What is it about the act of measurement that collapses the wave function, that projects the system into a definite state that freezes the quantum evolution? Is the observation performed by the measuring instrument? By the photon that interacts with the system? By the detector that records the photon? By the computer that processes the detector's output? Or by the conscious observer who reads the computer's screen? This is the measurement problem, the deepest and most persistent conceptual difficulty in quantum mechanics, and the Quantum Zeno effect sharpens it to a razor's edge. If observation freezes quantum systems, then the nature of observation determines which systems are frozen and which are free to evolve. If observation is merely physical interaction, the exchange of energy or information between two systems, then every physical system in the universe is constantly being observed by every other physical system, and the Quantum Zeno effect should freeze everything. Nothing should change, nothing should evolve, nothing should decay. The universe should be frozen in its initial state, pinned in place by the universal cross-observation of all systems by all other systems. This is a genuine puzzle, and the different interpretations of quantum mechanics resolve it in different ways. The Copenhagen interpretation says that observation is an irreducible, unanalyzable primitive. The wave function collapses when a measurement occurs, and the nature of measurement is not further explicable. The many worlds interpretation says that observation does not collapse the wave function at all. Every possible outcome occurs, in every measurement, in a different branch of the universal wave function. The decoherence interpretation says that observation is environmental interaction. A system decoheres when it interacts with its environment, and the decoherence produces the appearance of collapse without any actual collapse occurring. Each interpretation gives a different answer to the question of why the Quantum Zeno Effect does not freeze everything. Copenhagen says, not everything is being measured. Many worlds says, nothing is really frozen, it is just frozen in this branch. Decoherence says, environmental interaction is selective, not universal, and the selectivity determines which systems are frozen and which are free. But none of these interpretations is fully satisfying. Copenhagen does not explain what constitutes a measurement. Many worlds does not explain why we experience a single definite outcome rather than all outcomes simultaneously. And decoherence does not explain why environmental interaction produces the classical world of definite properties rather than a universe of universal quantum fog. The question remains open. What constitutes the observation that sustains quantum states? What is it about certain interactions that produce the Zeno freezing, and about others that do not? And is there a form of observation that is so continuous, so complete, and so universal that it could account for the stability of the entire physical world, the stability that the second law of thermodynamics, left to its own devices, would long ago have destroyed? But the universe is not frozen. Things change. Systems evolve. Radioactive atoms decay. Stars burn. Life emerges. Consciousness awakens. Something is allowing quantum systems to evolve despite being embedded in an environment of constant physical interaction. And the question of what that something is and what it reveals about the relationship between observation, consciousness, and the sustaining of physical reality is the question that the next stage of this investigation will pursue. Before we proceed, we must examine the Quantum Zeno Effect's mirror image. The quantum Anti-Zeno Effect, discovered theoretically by Asher Perez in 1980 and confirmed experimentally by multiple groups. The Anti-Zeno Effect shows that under certain conditions, frequent measurement does not freeze the system but accelerates its decay. The system evolves faster when it is observed, not slower. The direction of the effect freezing or acceleration depends on the relationship between the measurement frequency and the energy spectrum of the system. For measurements that are very frequent relative to the system's natural evolution time, the Zeno effect dominates and the system is frozen. For measurements at intermediate frequencies, the anti-Zeno effect can dominate and the system decays faster. The anti-Zeno effect adds a crucial nuance to our investigation. Observation does not merely freeze, it modulates. It shapes the trajectory of the quantum system in a way that depends on the frequency, the precision, and the nature of the observation. The observer is not a passive presence whose mere existence freezes everything. The observer is an active agent whose specific mode of observation determines whether the system is frozen, accelerated, or steered into a specific trajectory. The observation is a form of control, a mechanism by which the observer's attention shapes the behavior of the observed system. The Zeno-anti-Zeno duality has a specific implication for our investigation. Observation is not merely a stabilizing force. It is a creative force, a force that can both freeze and accelerate, both stabilize and destabilize, both preserve and transform. The effect of observation depends on the nature of the observation, The quality of attention determines the quality of the outcome. This is a physics result, not a philosophical claim. The mathematics of the Zeno and Anti-Zeno effects is precise. The outcome depends on the spectral properties of the measurement, the frequency of the observations, and the energy structure of the system. Different observations produce different outcomes. The observer's attention is not a blunt instrument. It is a precision tool that shapes the trajectory of the observed system with a specificity that no classical force can match. This precision is exactly what the contemplative traditions describe. The meditator's attention is not merely focused. It is calibrated, adjusted in its quality, its frequency, and its depth to produce specific effects on the mental system it observes. Mindfulness practice is not generic attention. It is non-reactive attention, bare attention, choiceless awareness. Each a specific mode of observation that produces specific effects on the mental states it observes. The traditions have spent millennia refining the technology of observation, developing increasingly precise and increasingly effective modes of attention that produce increasingly deep and increasingly stable transformations of the conscious system. The contemplative traditions have described this relationship between attention and reality with extraordinary precision. In Buddhism, the concept of sati mindfulness, the sustained, non-reactive awareness of the present moment, is described as a stabilizing force. The practitioner who maintains mindfulness stabilizes their mental states, preventing the fluctuations, the distractions, and the reactive patterns that would otherwise carry the mind from state to state in an uncontrolled cascade of thoughts, emotions, and impulses. Mindfulness freezes the mental flux, not by suppressing it, but by observing it with such sustained attention that the fluctuations are damped and the mind settles into a stable, coherent, non-reactive state. The Buddhist practitioner is performing the Quantum Zeno Effect on their own consciousness, using sustained observation to stabilize a system that would otherwise decay into the disordered, decoherent, fluctuating state that the tradition calls samsara. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki described this with characteristic simplicity. When you do something, you should burn yourself up completely, like a good bonfire, leaving no trace of yourself. The burning is the complete investment of attention in the present moment. The leaving no trace is the freezing of the past and the future by the intensity of the present moment observation. When you observe the present moment with total attention, the past ceases to pull you backward and the future ceases to pull you forward. The mental system is frozen in the present, stabilized by observation, held in place by attention, prevented from decaying into the distracted, scattered, temporally fragmented state that the untrained mind naturally occupies. The Japanese Zen tradition's practice of shikantaza, just sitting, is the most radical application of the Quantum Zeno Effect to consciousness. In shikantaza, the practitioner does not focus on the breath, a mantra, or any other object. They simply sit with complete, objectless, panoramic awareness, observing everything and focusing on nothing. The practice is the continuous observation of the totality of conscious experience, a measurement so complete and so continuous that no mental state can evolve unobserved, no fluctuation can occur without being witnessed, no thought can arise and pass without being seen. The result, described by every Zen master who teaches shikantaza, is a state of extraordinary stillness and clarity, a mind that has been stabilized by its own observation into a state of luminous, transparent, unshakable presence. The neuroscience supports this. The EEG signatures of advanced shikantaza practitioners show enhanced gamma coherence, the 40 Hz oscillations, associated with integrated conscious awareness, and reduced default mode network activity, suppression of the self-referential thought patterns that produce mental fluctuation. The brain in Shikantaza is a brain that has applied the Quantum Zeno Effect to itself, stabilizing its own quantum states through continuous, panoramic, non-selective observation. In Christianity, the concept of the practice of the presence of God, developed by Brother Lawrence, a 17th century Carmelite friar, describes the sustained awareness of the divine presence in every moment and every activity. Brother Lawrence taught that the practice of maintaining continuous awareness of God transforms every ordinary activity, washing dishes, sweeping floors, cooking meals, into a sacred act. The key is the continuity of the awareness. It is not enough to think of God occasionally. The awareness must be sustained, unbroken, continuous, like a measurement that never stops, like an observation that never ceases. And the effect of this continuous awareness, Brother Lawrence reported, was the stabilization of the soul, the cessation of the anxiety, the restlessness, and the spiritual fluctuation that characterize the soul that is not continuously observed by the divine presence. Brother Lawrence's practice is, in the framework of the Quantum Zeno Effect, the practice of continuous self-measurement in the presence of God. The soul that maintains continuous awareness of God is a quantum system that is continuously observed, and the continuous observation freezes the system in a state of stability, peace, and presence that the unobserved soul cannot achieve. The spiritual fluctuations are damped, the anxious oscillations are stilled, and the soul, held in place by the continuous observation of the divine, becomes what the Quantum Zeno Effect predicts a continuously observed system becomes: stable, unchanging, and resistant to decay. In Islam, the concept of muraqabah, the continuous awareness of God's observation, is the exact Islamic parallel. The Quran states, God is watchful over all things. The believer who lives in the awareness of this watchfulness, who maintains the consciousness that God is observing every thought, every action, every intention, at every moment, experiences a stabilization of the soul that the Islamic tradition describes as tumanina, tranquility, the deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing that you are held in the continuous observation of the divine. The divine observation stabilizes the soul. The divine attention prevents the spiritual decay that would otherwise occur. And the practice of muraqabah, the cultivation of the awareness of being observed by God, is the practice of placing oneself within the divine Quantum Zeno Effect, allowing the continuous observation of God to freeze the soul in a state of peace, presence, and spiritual stability. In Hinduism, the concept of Sakshi, the witness, the eternal observer, that is the true nature of the Atman, describes a consciousness that is always watching, always observing, always present. The Sakshi does not act, it does not judge, it does not intervene. It simply observes continuously, unchangingly, without interruption. And the observation of the Sakshi stabilizes the manifest world. The world exists because it is being observed. The forms persist because the witness is watching. And the practice of self-inquiry, who am I? The question that Ramana Maharshi taught as the most direct path to liberation is the practice of turning the attention toward the witness itself, toward the observer that sustains all things through the act of observation. The practice of neti, not this, in the Advaita Vedanta tradition, is the systematic inquiry into the nature of the witness. The practitioner examines each object of experience and recognizes, I am not this body, the body is observed, so I am the observer, not the observe. I am not these thoughts, the thoughts are observed, so I am the observer. I am not these emotions, the emotions are observed. I am not this personality, the personality is observed. What remains after every object has been negated is the pure witness, the Sakshi, the awareness that observes everything and is identical to nothing it observes. This pure witness is, in the Advaita framework, identical to Brahman, the cosmic ground, the universal consciousness, the awareness that sustains all things through the act of observation. The Quantum Zeno Effect gives this ancient practice a physical resonance that the Advaita masters could not have anticipated. If observation stabilizes quantum systems, and if the universe is a quantum system, then the witness that observes the universe is the witness that stabilizes the universe. The Sakshi is not merely the subjective experience of awareness. It is the physical mechanism by which reality is sustained, the continuous observation that prevents the quantum state of the cosmos from decaying into featureless equilibrium. In the next stage, we will pursue the deepest question that the Quantum Zeno Effect raises. Who, or what, is performing the observation that sustains the universe? If continuous observation prevents quantum decay, and if the universe has not decayed into featureless equilibrium despite being 14 billion years old, then something is observing the universe continuously, holding it in a state of structured, organized, far from equilibrium complexity that the second law of thermodynamics says it should have long ago abandoned. What is that something? Is it the physical environment? Is it the entanglement structure of the vacuum? Is it consciousness? Or is it what the contemplative traditions have been calling, for millennia, by the name of God? We have established that the Quantum Zeno Effect is real, that continuous observation freezes quantum systems, prevents transitions, and stabilizes states that would otherwise decay. We have seen it confirmed in trapped ions, tunneling atoms, Bose-Einstein condensates, superconducting qubits, and photons passing through opaque barriers. And we have seen that the effect raises a question that quantum mechanics has struggled with since its inception. What constitutes an observation? Now we must pursue this question to its deepest level, because the Quantum Zeno Effect does not merely ask what an observation is, it asks, who is observing? If observation sustains quantum states, and if the universe is a quantum system whose states have been sustained for 14 billion years, then something has been observing the universe continuously since the Big Bang. And the question of what that something is, and whether it has anything to do with what the contemplative traditions call God, is the question that drives this investigation to its center. The history of quantum mechanics is, in large part, the history of the argument about the observer. The argument began in 1927 at the Solvay conference in Brussels, where the founders of quantum mechanics gathered to debate the meaning of the theory they had created. On one side stood Niels Bohr, who argued that the observer is an irreducible element of quantum mechanics, that the act of observation is not merely a way of learning about the system, but a constitutive part of the physical process that determines the system's behavior. The wave function does not describe the system as it is in itself. It describes the system in relation to an observer, and the collapse of the wave function, the transition from the superposition of possibilities to a single, definite outcome, occurs when the observer performs a measurement. Without the observer, there is no collapse. Without the collapse, there is no definite outcome. Without the definite outcome, there is no physical reality in the ordinary sense. On the other side stood Albert Einstein, who argued that the observer is irrelevant, that physical reality exists independently of whether anyone is looking at it, and that the wave function is an incomplete description of a system that has definite properties at all times, whether observed or not. Einstein's objection was not merely philosophical, it was visceral. "Do you really believe," Einstein asked, "that the moon is not there when you are not looking at it?" The question was rhetorical. Einstein believed the moon was there, whether anyone looked at it or not. And he spent the last 3 decades of his life trying to find a theory that would restore the observer-independent reality that quantum mechanics seemed to deny. Einstein failed. The Bell experiments of the 1970s and 1980s, culminating in the 2022 Nobel Prize awarded to Aspect, Clauser, and Zeilinger, demonstrated that no observer-independent, Locally real description of quantum mechanics is possible. The moon is not there in the way Einstein believed it was there. The moon's properties are not definite until they are measured. And the measurement, the observation, the act of looking, is not merely a way of discovering pre-existing properties. It is the act that brings definite properties into existence. The implications of Bell's theorem for the observer cannot be overstated. Before Bell, it was possible to believe that quantum mechanics was merely a calculational tool, that the real world had definite properties at all times, and that the wave function was an incomplete description of this definite reality. After Bell, this belief is no longer tenable. The experiments have ruled out local realism, the combination of definite pre-existing properties, realism, and the prohibition against faster-than-light influences, locality. At least one of these must be abandoned. And most physicists have chosen to abandon realism to accept that quantum systems do not have definite properties until they are measured, and that the measurement is the act that brings definite properties into existence. This means that the observer is not an optional feature of quantum mechanics that can be removed by a clever reformulation. The observer is built into the structure of the theory at the deepest level. The properties of quantum systems are observer-relative, defined in relation to a measurement, not in relation to an independent reality. And the Quantum Zeno Effect is the most dramatic expression of this observer relativity. The observer does not merely determine what properties the system displays. The observer determines whether the system changes at all. The Hungarian physicist Eugene Wigner took Bohr's position to its logical extreme. Wigner argued that the collapse of the wave function requires consciousness, that the chain of physical interactions between the quantum system, the measuring apparatus, the detector, the computer, and the readout does not produce a definite outcome until a conscious observer reads the result. Every physical component of the measurement chain is itself a quantum system, and the interaction between quantum systems does not collapse the wave function. It merely extends the superposition to include the measuring apparatus. The detector is now in a superposition of detected and not detected. The computer is in a superposition of recorded and not recorded. The readout is in a superposition of displayed result A and displayed result B. The chain of superpositions extends indefinitely through the physical world. The famous Wigner's friend thought experiment, until it trained, reaches a conscious observer, at which point the superposition collapses and a definite outcome is produced. The Wigner's friend scenario has been extended by the physicists Daniela Fraukiger and Renato Renner at ETH Zurich into a thought experiment that demonstrates a genuine logical inconsistency in quantum mechanics if consciousness is not given a special role. The Fraukiger-Renner experiment, published in Nature Communications in 2018, shows that if quantum mechanics applies universally, including to the brains of conscious observers, then different observers can reach contradictory conclusions about the same experiment. The contradiction can be resolved only by granting consciousness a special status in the measurement process, by accepting that the conscious observation is the point at which the superposition collapses and the definite outcome is produced. The Fraukiger-Renner result has been intensely debated, and not all physicists accept its implications, but it demonstrates that the question of whether consciousness plays a special role in quantum mechanics is not merely a philosophical indulgence. It is a live, technically precise, experimentally relevant question that the most rigorous analysis of the measurement process has not resolved. Wigner's argument is controversial. Most physicists today reject the idea that consciousness is necessary for wave function collapse, preferring the decoherence interpretation in which the interaction between a quantum system and its macroscopic environment produces the appearance of collapse without any role for consciousness. But the decoherence interpretation does not actually solve the measurement problem. It explains why the interference between the branches of the superposition becomes undetectable, but it does not explain why one branch is experienced rather than both. The question of why we experience a single definite outcome rather than a superposition of all possible outcomes remains unanswered in the Decoherence framework. John von Neumann, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century and one of the founders of the mathematical framework of quantum mechanics, analyzed the measurement process in his 1932 treatise, Mathematical Foundations of Quantum Mechanics, and reached a conclusion that physicists have been uncomfortable with ever since. Von Neumann showed that the quantum mechanical description of the measurement process can be consistently formulated only if there is a boundary, a cut, between the quantum system being measured and the classical apparatus performing the measurement, but the location of the cut is arbitrary. You can place it between the atom and the detector, or between the detector and the computer, or between the computer and the conscious observer. The physics is the same regardless of where you place the cut. The only thing that changes is which part of the system is treated as quantum and which part is treated as classical. Von Neumann concluded that the only non-arbitrary location for the cut is at the boundary between the physical world and the conscious mind. Everything on the physical side of the cut, atoms, detectors, computers, readouts, brains, is a quantum system described by the Schrödinger equation. The collapse occurs at the point where the physical world interfaces with consciousness. Consciousness is not part of the quantum system. It is the boundary condition that determines the system's behavior. It is the observer whose observation produces the collapse. The physicist Henry Stapp, whose work we have encountered throughout this series, has developed von Neumann's framework into a comprehensive theory of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Stapp argues that conscious choices are quantum events, moments at which consciousness selects a specific outcome from among the quantum possibilities. And the Quantum Zeno Effect, in Stapp's framework, is the mechanism by which conscious attention stabilizes the selected outcome, holding it in place, preventing it from decaying back into the superposition, maintaining the definite classical world of experience against the quantum tendency toward indefiniteness. Stapp's framework makes a specific prediction about the Quantum Zeno Effect. The stability of the physical world depends on the quality and the continuity of the conscious observation that sustains it. A world that is observed continuously by a consciousness of high-quality, focused, sustained, non-fluctuating attention would be maximally stable. A world that is observed intermittently by a consciousness of low-quality, fragmented, distracted, fluctuating attention would be less stable. And a world that is not observed at all would have no definite properties at all. It would exist in a superposition of all possible states, with no collapse, no definiteness, and no physical reality in the classical sense. Stapp's framework provides a specific mechanism for the relationship between contemplative practice and physical reality. If conscious attention performs quantum measurements, and if the Quantum Zeno Effect means that sustained attention stabilizes the measured state, then the contemplative practitioner who sustains focused, non-fluctuating attention on a specific state is performing a continuous quantum measurement that stabilizes that state against decay. The meditator is not merely calming their mind. They are stabilizing the quantum states of their neural system through the Zeno mechanism, producing the enhanced coherence, the reduced fluctuation, and the extraordinary stability that advanced practitioners report. The physicist Amit Goswami at the University of Oregon has extended Stapp's framework into a full-blown idealist interpretation of quantum mechanics, arguing that consciousness is the ground of all being and that the physical world is a manifestation of consciousness rather than the other way around. In Goswami's framework, the Quantum Zeno Effect is the mechanism by which consciousness manifests the physical world, the continuous observation through which the cosmic consciousness brings the definite, structured, classically appearing world into existence from the quantum possibilities of the wave function. The physical world is not an independent reality that consciousness observes from outside. It is a creation of consciousness, a continuous, moment-by-moment creation, sustained by the continuous observation that the Quantum Zeno Effect describes. Goswami's idealism is a minority position in physics, but it is consistent with the mathematical structure of quantum mechanics, with the Quantum Zeno Effect, and with the contemplative traditions that have described the universe as a manifestation of divine consciousness for millennia. This is where the investigation intersects with our earlier investigation of the acceleration of time. If the stability of the physical world depends on the quality of the conscious observation that sustains it, and if the quality of human consciousness is degrading, fragmenting under the pressure of the attention economy, depleting under the influence of chronic distraction, thinning under the assault of the digital environment, then the stability of the experienced world may be degrading along with it. The acceleration of time, the fragmentation of experience, the sense that reality itself is becoming less solid, less real, less reliable. These may be not merely psychological complaints, but symptoms of a genuine reduction in the quality of the observation that sustains the classical world. But this framework places an enormous burden on human consciousness, a burden that human consciousness obviously cannot bear alone. Human beings sleep, human beings are distracted, human beings are born and die. If the stability of the universe depends on continuous conscious observation, and if the only observers are human beings, then the universe should collapse every time every human being falls asleep. It should have collapsed long before human beings existed. The universe is 14 billion years old. Human consciousness has existed for at most a few 100,000 years. What was observing the universe for the first 13 billion, 700 million years? The question is sharpened by the fine-tuning of the early universe. The initial conditions of the Big Bang, the density, the temperature, the ratio of matter to antimatter, the amplitude of the primordial fluctuations were tuned to extraordinary precision. If the initial density had differed by 1 part in 10 to the 60th from its actual value, the universe would have either collapsed immediately or expanded so rapidly that no structures could form. The fine-tuning of the initial conditions is a form of observation, a selection of specific initial values from among the quantum possibilities that the pre-Big Bang state contained. And this selection occurred billions of years before any human being or any biological consciousness of any kind existed. Wheeler's participatory universe addresses this by proposing that the observation can reach backward in time. The conscious observers, who exist now, at this stage of the universe's evolution, are performing observations that retroactively determine the properties of the early universe, including the initial conditions that made their own existence possible. The loop is self-consistent. The observers create the initial conditions that create the observers. But this loop requires that the observers eventually exist, and the question of what sustained the universe during the billions of years before the observers arrived remains. This question has 3 possible answers, each of which opens a different vista. The first answer is the decoherence answer. The physical environment observes itself. Every quantum system interacts with every other quantum system, and these interactions produce the decoherence that gives the macroscopic world its classical appearance. The observation that sustains the classical world is not performed by consciousness. It is performed by the physical environment, by the thermal photons, the air molecules, the electromagnetic fields, and the gravitational interactions that constitute the decoherent environment in which every macroscopic object is embedded. The universe does not need a conscious observer. It observes itself through the physical interactions between its components, and these interactions produce the Zeno-like stabilization that maintains the classical world. This answer is the mainstream answer, and it is partially correct. Decoherence is real, it is experimentally confirmed, and it does explain the appearance of classical behavior in the macroscopic world. But it has a limitation that we have already identified. Decoherence does not actually collapse the wave function. It produces the appearance of collapse by making the interference between the branches undetectable. But the branches are all still there, in the universal wave function, superposed and uncollapsed. Decoherence explains why we do not see the superposition. It does not explain why there is a definite outcome, rather than a superposition of outcomes. The measurement problem remains. The second answer is the panpsychist answer. Consciousness is everywhere. If consciousness is not a byproduct of brain complexity, but a fundamental feature of physical reality, as the panpsychist framework that we explored in our investigation of the first observer proposes, then every physical system has some degree of consciousness, some degree of awareness, some degree of observational capacity. The electron has a minimal awareness. The atom has a slightly greater awareness. The molecule, the cell, the organism, the brain, each has an increasingly rich and increasingly integrated awareness that corresponds to its increasing physical complexity. And the universe as a whole has a consciousness, a cosmic awareness that pervades every point of space and that performs the continuous observation that the Quantum Zeno Effect requires to sustain the physical world. The panpsychist answer resolves the problem of the pre-human universe. The universe did not need to wait for human beings to evolve before it could be observed. It was being observed from the first instant by the minimal consciousness of the quantum fields, by the proto-awareness of the elementary particles, by the increasing consciousness of the increasingly complex systems that the evolutionary process produced. The observation has been continuous since the Big Bang, because consciousness has been present since the Big Bang. And the stability of the physical world is maintained not by human observation, but by the cosmic observation that pervades every point of space-time. Integrated information theory supports this answer. In IIT, consciousness is identical to integrated information phi, which is present in any system whose parts are more connected than the sum of their individual connections. Even the simplest physical systems have non-zero phi. Even the quantum vacuum has phi, because the entanglement between different regions of the vacuum constitutes a form of integration that IIT identifies with minimal consciousness. The universe is, at every point and at every moment, conscious to some degree, and this universal consciousness performs the universal observation that the Quantum Zeno Effect requires. The panpsychist answer has a specific implication for the Quantum Zeno Effect. The observation that sustains the universe is not a single, centralized act performed by a single observer. It is a distributed, decentralized, omnipresent act performed by the consciousness that pervades every quantum system in the universe. The electron observes its own state, the atom observes its own structure, the molecule observes its own bonds, and the collective observation of all quantum systems produces the collective Zeno effect that sustains the classical world. This distributed observation is structurally identical to the decoherence mechanism with one crucial difference. Decoherence is physical interaction without awareness. Panpsychist observation is physical interaction with awareness, with the minimal, proto-conscious awareness that IIT attributes to every integrated system. The difference matters because the Quantum Zeno Effect, as Stapp has argued, may require not merely physical interaction, but attentive observation, the specific quality of awareness that collapses the wave function and produces definite outcomes. If decoherence alone were sufficient, the measurement problem would be solved, and the entire debate about the observer would be moot. The fact that the debate persists suggests that something beyond decoherence is needed, something that the panpsychist framework provides in the form of universal, distributed, proto-conscious observation. The third answer is the theological answer. God observes the universe. The continuous, uninterrupted, omnipresent observation that sustains the physical world is not performed by the physical environment alone, and it is not performed by the distributed, minimal consciousness of panpsychism alone. It is performed by a cosmic consciousness that the contemplative traditions call God, a consciousness that is omnipresent, present at every point, omniscient, aware of every quantum state, and continuously attentive, never sleeping, never distracted, never absent. The divine observation is the ultimate Quantum Zeno Effect, the continuous measurement that holds the universe in existence, that prevents the quantum state of the cosmos from decaying into featureless equilibrium, and that sustains the structured, organized, far from equilibrium complexity that makes life, consciousness, and the contemplative traditions themselves possible. These three answers are not mutually exclusive. Decoherence, panpsychist awareness, and divine observation may all be operative simultaneously, at different levels of description, contributing to the total observation that sustains the physical world. The physical environment provides the decoherence that produces the classical appearance. The distributed consciousness of panpsychism provides the minimal awareness that maintains the quantum coherence of each system, and the divine consciousness provides the ultimate, continuous, uninterrupted observation that sustains the whole, the cosmic Zeno effect that holds the universe in existence from moment to moment. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler, whose participatory universe we have encountered in every investigation in this series, described the relationship between observation and existence with a phrase that has become one of the most quoted in the history of physics. No elementary phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is a registered phenomenon, until it is observed. Wheeler was not claiming that the moon does not exist when you are not looking at it. He was claiming something more subtle and more radical, that the properties of the moon, its position, its momentum, its energy, its spin, do not have definite values until they are measured. The moon exists as a quantum system with a range of possible properties. The observation selects the specific properties that the moon displays, and without observation, the moon is not nothing, it is everything, a superposition of all possible states, undefined and indefinite, waiting for the observation that will give it the specificity that we call reality. Wheeler illustrated this with his famous smoky dragon image. We know where the dragon's tail is, the preparation of the quantum system, and we know where the dragon's mouth is, the measurement outcome. But the body of the dragon, the path the system took between preparation and measurement, is shrouded in smoke. The dragon's body does not have a definite shape until the measurement at the mouth determines it. The path is not merely unknown, it is undefined, a superposition of all possible paths that only becomes definite when the observation at the end selects one. The Quantum Zeno Effect applied to Wheeler's dragon means that the continuous observation does not merely select the outcome at the mouth. It defines the body of the dragon at every point along its length. The continuous observation does not merely determine what the system does at the moment of measurement. It determines what the system is doing at every moment between measurements. The observation constructs the trajectory, builds the path, defines the history, creates the narrative of the system's evolution from preparation to measurement. Without the observation, there is no trajectory. There is only a superposition of all possible trajectories, a smoky dragon with no body, a story with no plot, a history with no events. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, which we examined in our investigation of the future self, demonstrated that the observation can reach backward in time and determine the properties of a system retroactively. A photon that passed through a double slit billions of years ago can be made to behave as if it passed through one slit or both slits by a measurement performed today. The observation does not merely determine the present properties of the system, it determines the past properties. The observation creates the history of the system as well as its present state. In the Quantum Zeno framework, Wheeler's delayed choice adds a stunning dimension. The continuous observation that sustains the universe is not merely maintaining the present state of the cosmos. It is maintaining the entire history of the cosmos, the complete, four-dimensional block of space-time events that constitutes the past, present, and future of the universe. The observation does not merely prevent the current state from decaying. It sustains the entire block, every moment of the past, every possibility of the future, in a continuous, uninterrupted, retroactively effective act of cosmic witness. The contemplative traditions describe exactly this. In Christianity, the doctrine of divine providence describes God's continuous sustaining of creation. The theologian Thomas Aquinas wrote, "God is the cause of all things by his intellect and will, and he preserves all things in existence." The preservation is not a single act performed at the moment of creation. It is a continuous act, a moment-by-moment sustaining of everything that exists, without which everything would collapse into nothing. Aquinas explicitly compared God's sustaining of creation to the sustaining of light by the sun. Just as the room goes dark, the instant the sun's light is removed, the universe would cease to exist. The instant God's sustaining attention is withdrawn, the divine observation is continuous, uninterrupted, and constitutive. God does not merely create the universe and leave it to run. God sustains the universe at every moment through the continuous act of observation that the Quantum Zeno Effect describes. The medieval philosopher Nicholas of Cusa described God's relationship to creation with an image that directly anticipates the Quantum Zeno framework. God is the non-other, that which is not other than anything, that which is present in everything as the ground of its existence. Cusa argued that if God ceased to be present in any created thing, that thing would instantly cease to exist, not because God is punishing it or withdrawing from it, but because God's presence is constitutive of its existence. The thing does not have existence in itself. It has existence only in God's presence, only in the continuous divine observation that sustains it from moment to moment. The Protestant reformer John Calvin expressed the same idea with characteristic directness. The world would collapse into nothing if God withdrew his hand for a single moment. Calvin was not speaking metaphorically. He was making an ontological claim about the dependence of created reality on the continuous divine attention. The claim is that creation is not a one-time event that produces a self-sustaining universe. Creation is a continuous act, an ongoing, moment-by-moment sustaining of everything that exists by the divine will and the divine attention. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, "With creation, God does not abandon his creatures to themselves. He not only gives them being and existence, but also, and at every moment, upholds and sustains them in being." The upholding and sustaining is the divine Zeno effect, the continuous measurement that prevents the quantum state of creation from decaying, that holds every particle in its state, that maintains every structure in its form, and that sustains the entire edifice of physical reality against the entropic tendency toward dissolution. In Buddhism, the concept of Kanavada momentariness describes reality as a sequence of discrete, instantaneous moments, each one arising and passing away in an infinitesimal instant. Nothing persists from one moment to the next. The appearance of continuity, the appearance that the table is the same table from one moment to the next, that you are the same person from one moment to the next, is an illusion created by the rapidity of the succession. In reality, each moment is a fresh arising, a new creation that is produced anew at each instant. The Buddhist teaching of momentariness is the exact temporal analogue of the Quantum Zeno Effect. In the Zeno framework, the continuous observation does not merely maintain a static state. It produces a rapid sequence of collapses, each collapse projecting the system into a definite state, each state lasting only for the instant of the measurement, each measurement producing a fresh collapse that creates the next moment, from the possibilities that the previous moment left open. The continuity of the physical world is not the persistence of a static reality. It is the rapid succession of quantum collapses, each one a fresh creation, each one sustained by the observation that produces it, each one arising and passing away in the instant of the measurement, exactly as the Buddhist doctrine of momentariness describes. The Madhyamaka philosopher Dharmakirti, in the 7th century, developed the most rigorous philosophical analysis of momentariness. Dharmakirti argued that every entity is momentary, that nothing persists for more than an instant, and that the appearance of persistence is a conceptual construction imposed by the mind on a reality that is, at the deepest level, a sequence of instantaneous arisings and cessations. The entity at time t1 is not the same entity at time t2. It is a new entity, produced by the conditions that the previous entity left behind, arising fresh at each moment and ceasing at the same moment it arises. In the Quantum Zeno framework, Dharmakirti's analysis is physically precise. The quantum state at time t1 is projected, by the measurement, into a definite state. At time t2, a new measurement produces a new projection, a new definite state that is conditioned by the previous state but not identical to it. The entity at t2 is not the same entity as at t1. It is a fresh creation, produced by the observation, conditioned by the previous moment's state, and lasting only for the instant of the measurement. The persistence of the physical world is the persistence of the observation, the unbroken sequence of measurements that produces, at each instant, a fresh creation from the quantum possibilities that the previous instant left open. In the next stage, we will examine how the contemplative traditions describe the divine observation in detail, the specific ways that Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism characterize the continuous, sustaining, moment-by-moment attention that holds the universe in existence. Because if the Quantum Zeno Effect is the physical mechanism by which observation sustains reality, then the contemplative tradition's descriptions of the divine attention are descriptions, in their own languages, of the physical process that keeps the universe from collapsing. And the practices that the traditions prescribe for aligning human consciousness with the divine attention are practices for participating in the observation that sustains all things for joining. Through contemplative practice, the cosmic Zeno effect that holds the universe in being, we have established that the Quantum Zeno Effect freezes quantum systems through continuous observation, that the stability of the physical world may depend on continuous observation, and that the question of who or what performs this observation has three possible answers: the physical environment through decoherence, the distributed consciousness of Panpsychism, and the divine consciousness that the contemplative traditions call God. We have noted that these answers are not mutually exclusive, that decoherence, panpsychist awareness, and divine observation may operate simultaneously at different levels of description. Now we must examine what the contemplative traditions actually say about the divine observation, because the traditions do not merely assert that God sustains the universe. They describe how God sustains the universe with a specificity, a precision, and a consistency across independent traditions that is remarkable and that maps, with extraordinary accuracy, onto the physics of the Quantum Zeno Effect. Let us begin with Christianity, which has developed the most systematic theology of divine sustaining in the Western tradition. The Christian doctrine of creatio continua, continuous creation, distinguishes between two divine acts: the initial creation of the universe from nothing, called creatio ex nihilo, and the continuous sustaining of the universe in existence at every moment, called conservatio. The two acts are not separate. They are aspects of a single, ongoing, uninterrupted divine activity. God did not create the universe and then step back to watch it run. God creates the universe at every moment, holds it in existence at every instant, sustains every particle in its state, maintains every structure in its form, and prevents the entire edifice of physical reality from collapsing into the nothing from which it was created. The theologian Thomas Aquinas developed this doctrine with extraordinary philosophical precision in his Summa Theologica. Aquinas argued that the existence of every created thing is not a property that the thing possesses independently. It is a gift that God gives at every moment. The table in front of you does not have existence the way it has weight or color. It receives existence from God, continuously, the way a mirror receives light from the sun. Remove the sun, and the mirror goes dark instantly. Remove God's sustaining activity, and the table ceases to exist instantly. There is no delay. There is no gradual fading. The cessation is immediate, because the existence was never the table's own. It was always God's gift, given fresh at every moment. Aquinas further argued that God's sustaining of creation is not a generic, undifferentiated act. It is specific. God sustains each created thing according to its nature, sustaining the electron as an electron, the proton as a proton, the atom as an atom, the molecule as a molecule, the cell as a cell, the organism as an organism. The divine observation is not a blanket awareness that holds everything in a vague, undifferentiated existence. It is a precise, specific, individually tailored attention that maintains each thing in its particular state, with its particular properties, in its particular relationships with other things. The divine observation is, in the language of quantum mechanics, a continuous, system-specific measurement that projects each quantum system into its specific definite state at every moment. The Jesuit theologian Francisco Suarez, in the 16th century, refined Aquinas' analysis with a distinction that is directly relevant to the Quantum Zeno framework. Suarez distinguished between God's preservation of existence and God's concurrence with activity. Preservation is the divine act that holds a thing in existence. Concurrence is the divine act that cooperates with the thing's natural activity. Both are continuous, both are specific, and both are necessary. Without preservation, the thing ceases to exist. Without concurrence, the thing cannot act. The electron exists because God preserves it. The electron orbits because God concurs with the electromagnetic force that binds it. The two divine acts are distinguishable in thought, but inseparable in reality. A single, continuous, bimodal divine observation that simultaneously sustains existence and enables activity. The Reformation theologians, despite their theological disagreements with Catholicism, maintained the same doctrine. Martin Luther described God's sustaining of creation in terms of breathtaking intimacy. God is substantially present everywhere, in and through all creatures, in all their parts and places, so that the world is full of God and He fills all, but without His being encompassed and surrounded by it. He is at the same time enclosed by nothing and yet in everything. Luther's description is a description of omnipresent observation, an observation that is present in every part of every creature, sustaining every quantum state from within, not from without. The divine observation is not external surveillance. It is internal, sustaining an observation that operates from the inside of every physical system, constituting its existence from within. The Eastern Orthodox tradition developed this further through the theology of the divine energies, articulated by Gregory Palamas in the 14th century. Palamas distinguished between God's essence, which is utterly unknowable and inaccessible, and God's energies, which pervade all of creation, sustain all things in existence, and are directly experienceable by the purified human mind. The divine energies are not created. They are the uncreated activity of God, the continuous, omnipresent, moment-by-moment divine operation that holds everything in being. The divine energies are the orthodox Christian description of the mechanism of the cosmic Zeno effect. They are the specific, differentiated, omnipresent observations through which God sustains each created thing in its specific state. The energies are not separate from God. They are God, God in action, God sustaining, God observing, God holding the universe in existence through the continuous, uninterrupted activity that the Zeno effect describes. And the hesychast practitioner, who perceives the divine energies, who sees the uncreated light of Tabor, is perceiving the sustaining observation itself, the continuous divine measurement that holds every particle, every field, every quantum state in its specific, definite, classically appearing condition. The hesychast monks of Mount Athos, who have practiced the contemplative life in unbroken succession for over 1,000 years, describe the perception of the divine energies in terms that illuminate the Zeno framework from the experiential side. The monk who achieves theoria contemplative vision perceives the uncreated light that pervades all of creation. This light is not metaphorical, it is experiential, a directly perceived luminosity that the monks describe as the visible manifestation of God's sustaining presence in every atom of the created world. The light does not come from outside the objects it illuminates. It shines from within them, from the divine energy that constitutes their existence, that holds them in being, that is, the continuous observation through which God sustains them at every moment. The monk Silouan of Mount Athos, canonized as a saint in the Orthodox tradition, described the experience of the divine energies with characteristic directness. The grace of God gives the soul to know that the Lord is everywhere and sees all things. The everywhere and the sees all things are the two essential properties of the divine Zeno observation: omnipresence, everywhere, and continuous attention sees all things. The monk who perceives the divine energies is perceiving the sustaining observation itself, not from the outside, as a physicist observes the Zeno effect in a laboratory, but from the inside, as a conscious being directly experiences the divine attention that holds all things in existence. The Western Christian tradition's concept of divine concurrence adds another dimension. Concurrence is the doctrine that God cooperates with the secondary causes that operate in the natural world, that every natural event involves both a natural cause and a divine cause operating simultaneously. The fire burns because the chemistry of combustion operates, and because God sustains both the fire and the chemistry at every moment. The electron orbits because the electromagnetic force binds it, and because God sustains both the electron and the force at every moment. No natural cause operates independently of the divine sustaining. Every natural cause is concurrently a divine cause, a specific expression of the divine observation that holds the cause, the effect, and the relationship between them in existence at every instant. In the Quantum Zeno framework, divine concurrence is the doctrine that the physical interactions that produce decoherence, the natural causes, and the divine observation that sustains the physical world, the divine cause, operate simultaneously. The decoherence is not independent of God. It is a specific expression of God's sustaining activity, the mechanism through which the divine observation operates in the physical world. God sustains the physical world through the physical interactions that the physical world contains. The physics is not separate from God. The physics is God's method. Now let us turn to Buddhism, which provides the most detailed phenomenological analysis of the moment-by-moment arising of reality. The Buddhist doctrine of momentariness, Ksana-vada, which we introduced in the previous stage, is not merely a philosophical theory. It is a phenomenological observation, a report of what advanced meditators directly perceive when their attention is sufficiently refined to observe the microstructure of experience. The Vipassana meditator who achieves the stage of insight called Bhanganana knowledge of dissolution directly perceives the momentary arising and passing of all phenomena. They see, with the direct perception of the trained mind that nothing persists from one moment to the next. Each sensation, each thought, each perception, each moment of consciousness arises fresh and passes away in the same instant, replaced by the next moment that arises from the conditions that the previous moment left behind. This is not a belief. It is an observation that thousands of meditators, across centuries and across cultures, have independently confirmed through the systematic training of attention. The observation is as reproducible, as consistent, and as cross-culturally stable as any observation in the natural sciences, and it describes, from the inside, exactly what the Quantum Zeno Effect describes from the outside, a reality that is constituted by a rapid sequence of discrete moments, each one produced by an observation that collapses the possibilities into a definite actuality, each one lasting only for the instant of the observation, and each one giving way to the next moment as the next observation produces the next collapse. The Abhidharma, the systematic philosophical analysis of Buddhist doctrine, developed over centuries by scholars in multiple Buddhist schools, describes the moment-by-moment arising of reality with a precision that rivals quantum mechanics. The Abhidharma identifies the basic unit of experience as the citta, the mind moment, the minimal unit of conscious awareness that arises and passes in a single instant. Each citta has a specific object, a specific quality of attention, and a specific relationship to the cittas that precede and follow it. The sequence of cittas is not continuous. It is discrete, a sequence of individual, instantaneous, separately arising moments of awareness that the mind strings together into the appearance of a continuous flow. The Abhidharma further describes the process by which each citta arises. Each citta is produced by the conjunction of a sense object, a sense organ, and the appropriate form of consciousness. The conjunction produces a moment of contact phasa that is the phenomenological equivalent of a quantum measurement. The contact collapses the field of possibilities into a specific, definite experience. The experience lasts for the duration of the contact, one citta moment, and then passes, replaced by the next contact, the next measurement, the next moment of experience. The stream of consciousness is a stream of measurements, a continuous sequence of observation collapses that produces moment by moment the experienced world. The Abhidharma traditions differ in their estimates of the duration of a single citta moment, but all agree that it is extraordinarily brief. The Theravada Abhidharma estimates that a single thought process from the arising of an object in consciousness to the completion of the cognitive processing of that object involves 17 citta moments, and the Sarvastivada tradition estimates that there are approximately 6,480,000 citta moments in a single day, approximately 75 per second. This is remarkably close to the frame rate of human visual perception, which cognitive science estimates at approximately 40 to 80 frames per second. The Buddhist meditators, through the direct observation of their own mental processes, arrived at a temporal resolution for conscious experience that matches the estimate produced by 21st century neuroscience. Each citta moment is a measurement, a collapse of the quantum possibilities into a specific, definite experience. The stream of consciousness is a stream of measurements, each one lasting approximately 13 milliseconds, each one producing a single frame of the movie that the mind experiences as the continuous flow of reality. The movie is not continuous. It is discrete, a sequence of individual frames, each one freshly produced by the observation that constitutes it, strung together by the rapidity of the succession into the appearance of smooth, continuous, uninterrupted experience. The Quantum Zeno Effect operates at this frame rate. Each frame is stabilized by the observation that produces it, lasting for the duration of the observation and giving way to the next frame when the next observation arrives. The Yogacara school's concept of the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, provides the substrate from which the measurements draw their possibilities. The alaya vijnana contains the seeds beer of all possible experiences, and the measurement process, the contact between sense object, sense organ, and consciousness, actualizes specific seeds from the storehouse, producing specific experiences from the field of all possibilities. The alaya vijnana is the wave function of Buddhist psychology, the field of possibilities from which the measurement produces definite outcomes. And the continuous sequence of measurements that produces the stream of consciousness is the Buddhist version of the continuous Quantum Zeno observation that sustains the experienced world. The Theravada tradition's analysis of impermanence anicca at the finest level of meditative perception reveals three characteristics of each moment of arising. Each moment arises upada. Each moment persists for an instant thiti. And each moment passes away bhanga. The arising, persistence, and passing occur within a single mind moment. And the persistence is not a state of rest, but a state of sustained observation. The moment is held in existence by the attention that perceives it, and it passes the instant. The attention moves to the next moment. The persistence of each moment is the micro-Zeno effect, the brief stabilization of the quantum state by the observation that perceives it, lasting only for the duration of the observation, and giving way to the next state when the next observation arrives. The Zen tradition adds a dimension that is absent from the analytical Abhidharma framework: the question of what is doing the observing. The Zen master Basui Tokusho, in the 14th century, taught his students to pursue a single question relentlessly: who is the master? Who is the awareness that perceives each moment of experience? Who is the observer that sustains each chitta moment in existence? Who is the witness that watches the arising and passing of all phenomena? The question is not asking for a name or a concept. It is asking for a direct encounter with the observing awareness itself, with the consciousness that performs the observation that sustains reality. Basui's question is the contemplative version of the measurement problem. Who is measuring? Who is observing? Who is the consciousness that collapses the wave function? The physicist asks the question in the language of quantum mechanics. The Zen master asks it in the language of direct experience. And the question is the same question: what is the nature of the awareness that sustains reality through the act of observation? The Zen tradition's refusal to answer the question conceptually, its insistence that the answer can only be found through direct experience, through the Zazen practice of sustained self-inquiry, through the relentless pursuit of the question until the question dissolves and the question emerges with the awareness that was always asking, is the contemplative equivalent of the physicist's acknowledgement that the measurement problem has no solution within the current conceptual framework. The answer is not a concept. It is an experience, the experience of being the observing awareness, of recognizing that you are not the objects you observe but the observation itself, and that the observation is not a thing but a process, not an entity but an activity, not a noun but a verb. The answer that Zen provides is mu, nothing, no thing, the absence of any identifiable entity that can be pointed to as the observer. The observer is not a thing. It is not located in a place. It is not describable in terms. It is the groundless ground, the awareness that is prior to all objects, prior to all descriptions, prior to all identifications, and that constitutes the substrate from which all observations arise. The observer is not separate from the observed. The observer is the observing the activity, the process, the continuous act of awareness that produces the moments of experience without being reducible to any of the moments it produces. In Islam, the concept of divine sustaining qayyumiyyah is one of the most emphasized attributes of God in the Quran. The divine name Al-Qayyum, the self-subsisting, the sustainer of all, appears in the most recited verse of the Quran, Ayat al-Kursi. Allah, there is no deity except Him, the ever-living, the self-subsisting. Neither drowsiness overtakes Him nor sleep. The specificity of this verse is remarkable in the context of the Quantum Zeno Effect. The verse does not merely assert that God sustains the universe. It asserts that God's sustaining is continuous, that neither drowsiness nor sleep interrupts it. The divine observation never ceases. The divine attention never wavers. The Zeno measurement never stops. And the reason is not that God is particularly diligent. The reason is that the cessation of the divine attention would mean the cessation of the universe. God does not sleep because the universe cannot survive the divine sleep. The continuous wakefulness of God is not a luxury. It is a structural necessity, the condition without which the quantum state of the cosmos would immediately decay into the featureless equilibrium that the second law of thermodynamics predicts. The Islamic theologian Al-Ghazali, in his Ihya Ulum al-Din, developed the doctrine of continuous creation al-Khalq al-Mustamir with a precision that anticipates the Quantum Zeno framework by 9 centuries. Ghazali argued that God creates the universe anew at every instant. The universe does not persist from one moment to the next through its own power. It is recreated freshly, completely, from nothing at every moment. The existence you experience at this instant is not the continuation of the existence you experienced at the previous instant. It is a new existence, a fresh creation, produced by a fresh act of divine will, maintaining the appearance of continuity through the consistency of the divine intention. Ghazali's doctrine is the exact Islamic equivalent of the Buddhist Ksana. Both describe reality as a sequence of discrete, instantaneous moments, each one freshly created, each one lasting only for an instant, and each one giving way to the next through the creative activity that produces it. The difference is in the agent. For Buddhism, the creative activity is the dependent origination of conditions. For Islam, the creative activity is the will of God, but the structure is identical, a discrete, moment-by-moment, freshly created reality that is sustained by continuous creative observation. Ibn Arabi, whose work we have encountered throughout this series, developed Ghazali's doctrine of continuous creation into a comprehensive metaphysics that he called the renewal of creation at each instant, Tajaddud al-Khalq al-Anat. Ibn Arabi argued that the universe is not merely recreated at each instant, it is recreated differently at each instant. Each moment is a fresh manifestation of the divine names and attributes, a new expression of the divine creativity, a novel configuration of the divine possibilities that has never existed before and will never exist again. The universe at this instant is not the same universe as at the previous instant. It is a new universe, a fresh creation, bearing a family resemblance to the previous creation but not identical to it, because the divine creativity is infinite and never repeats itself exactly. Ibn Arabi described the experience of perceiving this continuous recreation as one of the highest stations of the Sufi path. The mystic who achieves this station perceives, directly and non-conceptually, that the world is being created anew at every moment, that the solid, persistent, apparently unchanging objects of ordinary perception are actually being freshly manifested at each instant by the divine creative imagination. The world is not a thing that exists. The world is an activity that God performs, a continuous, creative, infinitely novel act of divine self-expression that produces, at each instant, a fresh universe from the inexhaustible possibilities of the divine nature. The Ash'ari school of Islamic theology, to which Ghazali belonged, developed this further with the doctrine of occasionalism, the view that there are no natural causes. What appears to be causation, the fire burning the cotton, The knife cutting the bread is actually God creating the effect at the moment of the apparent cause. The fire does not burn the cotton. God creates the burning at the moment the fire touches the cotton. The knife does not cut the bread. God creates the cutting at the moment the knife touches the bread. Every event is a fresh divine creation. Every moment is a fresh divine observation. And the appearance of natural causation is a pattern in the divine will, the consistency of God's creative activity, which produces the same effects in the same circumstances, creating the regularity that we call the laws of nature. In the Quantum Zeno framework, the Ashari doctrine is a specific interpretation of the measurement process. The natural cause is the physical interaction that produces decoherence. The divine cause is the observation that collapses the wave function, and the two are concurrent. The physical interaction and the divine observation occur simultaneously, producing the definite outcome that the observer experiences as a natural event. The laws of nature are not independent of God. They are the patterns of the divine observation, the consistent regularities in God's continuous creative measurement of the universe. The Quran reinforces this with a verse that reads like a description of the Quantum Zeno effect. Every day, He is bringing about a matter. This verse, Surah Ar-Rahman 55-29, describes God's creative activity as continuous and unceasing, not a single act in the past, but an ongoing, daily, moment-by-moment activity that produces the fresh existence of each instant. The Arabic word yawm, usually translated as day, can also mean moment or period, and many scholars interpret the verse as describing God's moment-by-moment creative activity. At every moment, God is bringing about a matter, creating, sustaining, maintaining, observing the universe into continued existence. In Hinduism, the divine sustaining of the universe is described through the Trimurti, the three aspects of the divine: Brahma the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and Shiva the destroyer. The sustaining function is assigned to Vishnu, the God who maintains the universe in existence between the acts of creation and destruction, who preserves the cosmic order, and who intervenes through avatars when the order is threatened. The Vishnu Purana describes Vishnu's sustaining of the universe in terms that directly parallel the Quantum Zeno Effect. Vishnu pervades the universe, is present in every atom, and sustains every entity in its specific form through the continuous exercise of divine power. The sustaining is not passive, it is active, a continuous, moment-by-moment, entity-specific divine activity that maintains each thing in its nature and prevents the cosmic order from dissolving into chaos. The concept of Vishnu's Yoga Nidra, the divine yogic sleep, adds a fascinating dimension. Between cosmic cycles, when the universe is dissolved and awaiting recreation, Vishnu sleeps on the cosmic serpent, Ananta Shesha, in the ocean of milk. The universe does not exist during this sleep. It exists only when Vishnu is awake, when the divine attention is active, when the cosmic observation is in operation. The dissolution of the universe between cosmic cycles is the cessation of the divine Zeno observation, the withdrawal of the sustaining attention that allows the quantum state of the cosmos to decay into the undifferentiated ground state. And the recreation of the universe at the beginning of each new cycle is the resumption of the divine observation, the reactivation of the cosmic Zeno effect that holds the structured, organized, far from equilibrium universe in existence. The interplay between Vishnu's sustaining and Shiva's dissolution provides a complete description of the Zeno, Anti-Zeno dynamic. Vishnu's observation stabilizes the universe, preventing decay, maintaining structure, preserving the cosmic order. Shiva's withdrawal of observation destabilizes the universe, allowing decay, dissolving structure, destroying the cosmic order to make room for the new creation that follows. The two divine functions are complementary, the Zeno freezing that maintains, and the Anti-Zeno acceleration that transforms. Without Vishnu, nothing would persist. Without Shiva, nothing would change. And without Brahma, nothing new would be created from the possibilities that Shiva's dissolution opens. The Nataraja Shiva as the cosmic dancer is the visual representation of this dynamic. Shiva dances the universe into and out of existence, 1 foot on the ground of manifestation and 1 foot raised in the gesture of dissolution, surrounded by a ring of fire that represents the continuous cycle of creation and destruction. The dance is the spanda, the divine pulsation, and the rhythm of the dance is the frame rate of the cosmic Zeno effect. Each step creates a moment, each lift dissolves it, and the continuous rhythm of stepping and lifting produces the continuous existence of the world. The Bhagavad Gita expresses this with characteristic directness. Krishna, revealing his divine nature to Arjuna, declares, "I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. And, with a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe." The pervading and supporting is the continuous divine observation, the omnipresent, uninterrupted, entity-specific attention that holds every particle, every field, every quantum state in its definite condition. And the fragment, the single fragment of the divine that pervades the universe, is the fraction of infinite consciousness that is invested in the sustaining observation, the fraction that the Zeno effect requires to maintain the classical world in its structured, definite, far from equilibrium state. The Shaiva tradition's concept of spanda divine vibration, the creative pulsation of consciousness that produces the manifest world, provides the most dynamic description of the sustaining observation. Spanda is not a static observation that holds a fixed world in a fixed state. It is a vibrating, pulsating, rhythmically oscillating observation that produces the world through a rapid alternation of creation and dissolution, manifestation and withdrawal, observation and release. Each pulse of spanda creates a moment of existence, each withdrawal dissolves it, and the rapid succession of pulses produces the appearance of a continuous, persisting world, the appearance of stability from the rapid alternation of creation and dissolution, exactly as a movie produces the appearance of continuous motion from the rapid succession of individual frames. Spanda is the Hindu description of the Quantum Zeno Effect at its most precise. The divine consciousness pulsates. Each pulse is an observation that collapses the quantum possibilities into a definite actuality. The actuality lasts for the duration of the pulse, and the next pulse produces the next actuality from the possibilities that the previous actuality left open. The continuous pulsation of spanda produces the continuous existence of the world, a world that is not a static, persisting structure but a dynamic, vibrating, rhythmically recreated sequence of momentary actualities sustained by the continuous creative observation of the divine consciousness. The convergence across traditions is now complete. Christianity describes continuous creation conservatio, in which God sustains every created thing at every moment through a specific, differentiated, unceasing divine attention. Buddhism describes momentariness, kshanavada, in which reality is a sequence of discrete, instantaneous moments, each one freshly arising from the conditions and the observation that produce it. Islam describes continuous creation, al-khalq, al-mustamir, in which God recreates the universe at every instant through the unceasing exercise of divine will. And Hinduism describes spanda, the divine vibration in which the cosmic consciousness pulsates reality into existence through a rapid alternation of creation and dissolution. The descriptions differ in their theological frameworks, their philosophical vocabularies, and their cultural contexts. But they share the same structure. Reality is not a static, self-sustaining, independently existing substance. Reality is a continuous, moment by moment, observation-dependent process that requires unceasing attention to maintain. The sustaining attention is divine. It is omnipresent. It is specific. It is continuous. And it is constitutive, not an observation of a pre-existing reality, but the observation that brings reality into existence and that holds it in existence at every moment. In the final stage, we will ask what all of this means for you, for a conscious being who is both the product of the divine observation and a participant in it. Because if the universe is sustained by continuous observation, and if you are a conscious observer, then your observation participates in the sustaining of the world. Your attention is not merely a way of learning about reality. Your attention is a contribution to the observation that maintains reality. And the quality of your attention, its depth, its continuity, its presence, determines the quality of your contribution to the cosmic observation that holds everything in being. We have now assembled every piece of the argument. The Quantum Zeno Effect demonstrates that continuous observation stabilizes quantum systems, preventing them from evolving away from their current states. The measurement problem reveals that the nature of the observation, what constitutes a measurement, who performs it, and whether consciousness plays a constitutive role, remains the deepest unresolved question in physics. The three possible answers, decoherence, panpsychism, and divine observation, offer different but potentially complementary frameworks for understanding what sustains the physical world. And the contemplative traditions, across every major civilization, describe a continuous, uninterrupted, divine creative activity that holds the universe in existence from moment to moment, an activity that maps, with extraordinary precision, onto the Quantum Zeno Effect's description of continuous measurement sustaining quantum states. Now we must bring all of this together and ask the questions that matter most. What does the Quantum Zeno Effect mean for the nature of reality? What does it mean for the nature of God? What does it mean for the nature of death? And what does it mean for you, for a conscious being, living in a universe that is sustained by observation, and that you, through the quality of your attention, may be participating in sustaining? Let us begin with reality. If the Quantum Zeno Effect is the mechanism by which the physical world is sustained, then reality is not what the common sense picture assumes. The common sense picture says that the physical world is a solid, self-sustaining, independently existing structure that would continue to exist whether anyone observed it or not. The table is there whether you look at it or not. The mountain is there whether anyone climbs it or not. The universe is there whether any conscious being inhabits it or not. Reality is autonomous. It does not need an observer. The Quantum Zeno Effect challenges this picture at every point. The quantum system is not in a definite state until it is observed. The stability of the system depends on the continuity of the observation, and the removal of the observation allows the system to evolve away from its current state, to decay, to decohere, to dissolve into the superposition of possibilities from which the observation projected it. The system's reality is not autonomous, it is observer-dependent. It is sustained by the observation, and it would change, perhaps radically, if the observation were removed. This does not mean that the table disappears when you close your eyes. The table is a macroscopic object embedded in a decoherent environment, and the environmental decoherence provides a form of continuous observation that sustains the table's classical properties, whether or not any conscious being is looking at it. The table is observed by the air molecules that bounce off it, by the photons that scatter from its surface, by the gravitational field that holds it to the floor. The table is sustained by the universal observation of the physical environment. But the physical environment is itself a quantum system. The air molecules are quantum objects. The photons are quantum objects. The gravitational field is, in the framework of quantum gravity, a quantum object. And the question of what sustains these quantum objects, what performs the continuous observation that holds them in their states, leads to an infinite regress that can only be terminated by an observer that is not itself a quantum system, an observer that is outside the chain, an observer that does not need to be observed in order to exist. This is one of the oldest arguments in the history of philosophy, the argument from contingency. Every contingent thing requires a cause. Every caused thing requires a causer. And the chain of causation can only be terminated by something that is not contingent, something that exists necessarily, that does not require a cause, and that is the ground of all other existence. Aquinas formalized this as the third of his 5 ways. The Kalam argument in Islamic theology reaches the same conclusion, and the Quantum Zeno Effect gives the argument a specific physical content. The chain of observations can only be terminated by an observer that does not need to be observed. The necessary being is not merely a logical requirement. It is a physical requirement, the requirement that the chain of Zeno measurements have a ground, that the sequence of observations have an observer that is not itself a quantum system in need of observation. The contemplative traditions identify this terminal observer as God. The physicist might identify it as consciousness. The panpsychist might identify it as the universal proto-awareness that pervades all matter. But all 3 identifications share the same structure. There is something that observes without being observed, that sustains without being sustained, that holds all things in existence without needing anything to hold it in existence. This something is the ground of the Quantum Zeno Effect, the ultimate observer whose continuous attention is the continuous measurement that sustains the physical world. In Christianity, this ground is described as the self-existent God, the I Am of Exodus 3:14, the God whose name is being itself, the God who does not receive existence from anything but who is existence. God does not need an observer to sustain God's existence, because God's existence is not contingent. It is necessary. God is the one being in the universe, or rather, the one being beyond the universe whose existence is not sustained by the Quantum Zeno Effect, because God's existence is not the result of a measurement. God is the measurer, not the measured, the observer, not the observed, the ground on which the entire chain of observations rests. The Gospel of John's prologue: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made," describes the Logos as the agent of continuous creation. The Word is not a past tense creator who made the world and left it. The Word is a present tense sustainer, the continuous creative act through which all things are made, are being made, and will continue to be made at every moment. The phrase "without him was not anything made that was made" does not merely mean that nothing was created without the Word. It means that nothing exists without the Word, that the Word's creative sustaining is the condition of existence for everything that exists. Remove the Word, and not anything remains. The Word is the Zeno observer. The Word is the continuous measurement, and the physical world is the continuous output of the Word's continuous creative observation. The theologian Wolfhart Pannenberg described the divine sustaining in terms that directly anticipate the Quantum Zeno framework. God does not merely set the world in motion and then withdraw. God is the future toward which the world is drawn, the presence in which the world is held, and the past from which the world has emerged. God is the temporal ground of the world's temporality. The divine observation is not merely spatial present at every point. It is temporal present at every moment, sustaining the past, maintaining the present, and drawing the future into existence through the continuous creative attention that the Quantum Zeno Effect describes. In Buddhism, the ground is described as the unconditioned nibbana, the reality that is not produced by conditions and that does not depend on conditions for its existence. Everything in the conditioned world, every dharma, every kasana, every arising and cessation is produced by conditions and sustained by conditions. But nibbana is not conditioned. It is the ground from which the conditioned arises and into which the conditioned dissolves. It is the reality that the Zeno measurements produce their results against the backdrop of unconditioned awareness in which the conditioned world of moment-by-moment measurements unfolds. In Islam, the ground is described through the divine name, Al-Qayyum, the self-sustaining, the one who sustains all things while being sustained by nothing. The Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the throne, the most recited verse in the Quran, declares, God, there is no deity except Him, the ever-living, the self-sustaining. Neither drowsiness overtakes Him nor sleep. The verse is a precise description of the ultimate Zeno observer, ever-living, the observation never ceases, self-sustaining, the observer does not need to be observed, and sleepless, the observation is continuous, without interruption, without gaps, without the momentary cessation that would allow the universe to decay. The phrase, neither drowsiness overtakes him nor sleep, is, in the Quantum Zeno framework, a statement of extraordinary physical significance. If the continuous observation that sustains the universe were interrupted, if the divine observer fell asleep, grew drowsy, lost attention, for a single moment, the Zeno effect would cease, and the quantum systems of the universe would begin to evolve freely, decaying from their current states, losing their classical definition, dissolving into the superposition of possibilities that the continuous observation had been preventing. The universe would not merely deteriorate, it would lose its reality, the definite, structured, classically appearing reality that the continuous observation sustains. The Quranic assurance that God does not sleep is the assurance that the cosmic Zeno measurement never stops, that the observation is genuinely continuous, genuinely uninterrupted, and genuinely sufficient to maintain the entire physical universe in its current, classical, structurally complex state. The Islamic tradition's 99 names of God include multiple names that describe aspects of the continuous sustaining observation. Al-Hafiz, the preserver, the one who maintains all things in their states. Al-Muqit, the sustainer, the one who provides the sustenance that maintains existence. Al-Raqib, the watchful, the one whose observation misses nothing. Al-Muhaimin, the guardian, the one whose protective attention covers all things. Each name describes a different facet of the continuous divine observation that the Quantum Zeno Effect requires a different aspect of the cosmic measurement that holds the universe in being. The Sufi tradition's practice of reciting the divine names of meditating on Al-Qayyum, Al-Hafiz, Al-Raqib, and the other names that describe the sustaining observation is the practice of aligning individual consciousness with the cosmic observation that the names describe. The practitioner who meditates on Al-Qayyum is not merely contemplating an abstract divine attribute. They are attuning their consciousness to the specific quality of sustained, self-sufficient, sleepless attention that Al-Qayyum describes, the quality that, in the Quantum Zeno framework, is the mechanism that holds the universe in existence. The meditation on the divine name is the participation in the divine observation, and the participation produces, in the practitioner, the same quality of sustained, unfluctuating, stabilizing attention that the divine name embodies. In Hinduism, the ground is Brahman, the absolute, the unconditioned, the reality that is described in the Mandukya Upanishad as not internally cognitive, not externally cognitive, not cognitive both ways, not a mass of cognition, not cognitive, not non-cognitive. Brahman transcends the categories of observer and observed. Brahman is the ground of observation itself, the awareness in which all observation occurs, the consciousness in which all quantum measurements are performed, the field of knowing in which the Zeno effect operates. Brahman does not observe the universe from outside. Brahman is the observation, the act of awareness that constitutes the universe at every moment, that sustains it through the continuous Zeno measurement, and that is identical to the universe it sustains, because the observer and the observed, at the deepest level, are one. Now, let us consider what the Quantum Zeno Effect means for death. In our investigation of grief, we established that the information constituting a human being is not destroyed at death, that unitarity preserves the quantum correlations, that the Penrose-Hameroff model provides a mechanism for the survival of consciousness information in the quantum vacuum, and that Bohm's implicate order provides a framework in which death is the enfolding of the explicate back into the implicate, rather than the destruction of the person. The Quantum Zeno Effect adds a new dimension to this understanding. If the physical body is sustained by continuous observation by the Zeno measurements that hold the quantum states of the body's atoms, molecules, and cells in their classical configurations, then death is the cessation of this specific mode of observation. The Zeno measurements that sustain the body's biological processes stop. The quantum states that were held in place by the measurements begin to evolve freely. The atoms rearrange, the molecules decompose, the biological structures dissolve. The body returns to the quantum state of the environment. But the cessation of the body's Zeno measurements is not the cessation of all Zeno measurements. The divine observation that sustains the universe does not stop when an individual body dies. The cosmic Zeno effect continues, and the quantum information that constituted the person, the correlations, the entanglements, the patterns that encoded their memories, their personality, their relationships, and their identity is preserved in the quantum state of the universe, sustained by the same cosmic observation that sustains everything else. Death, in the Zeno framework, is not the withdrawal of all observation. It is the withdrawal of a specific, local, biological mode of observation, the mode that sustained the body's classical configuration. The person's quantum information transitions from the locally observed state of the living body to the cosmically observed state of the quantum vacuum. The information is not lost, it is redistributed, and it continues to be sustained by the cosmic Zeno effect, by the divine observation that the Quran assures us does not sleep, that the Christian tradition assures us does not cease, that the Buddhist tradition assures us is the unconditioned ground of all conditioned reality, and that the Hindu tradition assures us is the eternal Brahman in which all things rest. This framework resolves a puzzle that has troubled theologians for centuries. How can consciousness survive the death of the body if consciousness is produced by the body? The Zeno framework answers, consciousness is not produced by the body. The body is sustained by the observation that consciousness performs. The relationship is inverted. The body depends on consciousness, not consciousness on the body. And when the body ceases to function, consciousness does not cease. The biological mode of observation ceases. But the consciousness that performed the observation, the consciousness that was always, at its deepest level, a local expression of the cosmic observation that sustains all things, continues, sustained by the cosmic Zeno effect that sustained it before the body existed, that sustained it during the body's life, and that sustains it after the body's dissolution. The near-death experience, in this framework, is the experience of consciousness transitioning from the biological Zeno mode to the cosmic Zeno mode. The experience of the local observation dissolving into the universal observation, of the individual attention merging with the divine attention, of the personal consciousness recognizing, perhaps for the first time, that it was always sustained not by the body, but by the ground of being that sustains all things. The tunnel, the light, the feeling of peace, the encounter with deceased relatives, the life review. All of the features of the near-death experience are consistent with the experience of a consciousness that is transitioning from a narrow, body-mediated, locally sustained mode of observation to the infinite, divine, cosmically sustained mode that was always its true ground. The contemplative tradition's promise of life after death is, in the Zeno framework, the promise that the cosmic observation continues after the biological observation ceases. The person is not sustained by their body, they are sustained by the divine observation, and the divine observation does not stop when the body stops. The body is a temporary, local, biologically mediated participation in the cosmic Zeno effect. The person's true sustaining is not biological, it is divine, and the divine sustaining is permanent. The implications for grief are specific and consoling. When someone you love dies, the biological Zeno measurements that sustain their body cease. The body dissolves, the classical form disappears, and the grief you feel is the grief of losing the locally sustained, biologically mediated, sensory accessible presence that the body provided. But the person's quantum information, the correlations, the entanglements, the patterns that constituted their identity continues to be sustained by the cosmic Zeno effect. The divine observation that held the universe in existence before the person was born continues to hold the universe in existence after the person dies, and the person's information, encoded in the quantum state of the universe, continues to be sustained by the same observation that sustains everything else. The person is not unsustained. They are differently sustained. The local, biological sustaining has ceased. The cosmic, divine sustaining continues. And the practices that the contemplative traditions prescribe for maintaining connection with the dead, the prayers, the meditations, the rituals of remembrance are practices for aligning your observation with the cosmic observation that continues to sustain the person's quantum information. Your prayer for the dead is not a message sent into the void. It is a Zeno measurement, a sustained, loving, attentive observation directed toward the quantum state of the person you loved, performed in alignment with the divine observation that sustains that state, and capable, through the Zeno mechanism, of stabilizing and sustaining the connection that the biological death threatened but did not destroy. Now, let us consider what the Quantum Zeno effect means for you. You are a conscious being. You perform observations. Your observations collapse wave functions, produce definite outcomes, and stabilize quantum states through the Zeno mechanism. You are not a passive spectator in a pre-existing reality. You are an active participant in the observation that sustains reality. The quality of your attention, its focus, its continuity, its depth, its presence, determines the quality of the observation you perform, and the quality of the observation determines, through the Zeno mechanism, the stability and the coherence of the reality you experience. This is not a metaphor, it is a consequence of the physics. If the Quantum Zeno effect stabilizes quantum states through continuous observation, and if your consciousness performs quantum observations, then your sustained attention stabilizes the quantum states of the systems you observe. Your focused, continuous, present moment attention is a Zeno measurement, a measurement that holds the quantum state of the observed system in place, preventing it from decaying, maintaining its coherence, and sustaining its classical definition against the quantum tendency toward indefiniteness. The contemplative traditions have been teaching this for millennia, in every language available to them. The Buddhist practitioner who sustains mindfulness is performing the Zeno effect on their own mental states, stabilizing the mind against the fluctuations that the untrained mind cannot prevent. The Christian contemplative who practices the presence of God is participating in the divine Zeno effect, aligning their observation with the cosmic observation that sustains all things. The Muslim who practices muraqabah is placing themselves within the divine Zeno field, allowing the awareness of God's continuous observation to stabilize their consciousness against the spiritual decay that the heedless life produces. And the Hindu who practices dharana is training the attentional faculty that performs the Zeno measurement, strengthening the observer, refining the observation, and enhancing the capacity for the continuous, sustained, non-fluctuating attention that produces maximum Zeno stabilization. The practical implication is immediate. The quality of your attention is not merely a psychological preference, it is a physical force. Your sustained attention stabilizes the quantum states of the systems you observe. Your distracted attention allows those states to decay. And the cumulative effect of millions of conscious beings paying sustained attention or failing to pay sustained attention may affect the quality of the shared reality that all conscious beings inhabit. Consider what this means concretely. When you sit in meditation, sustaining, focused, non-fluctuating, present moment attention for 20 minutes, you are performing a continuous Zeno measurement on the quantum states of your neural system. The measurement stabilizes the neural states against the fluctuations that the untrained mind cannot prevent. The result is the enhanced gamma coherence, the reduced default mode activity, and the extraordinary stability and clarity that advanced meditators report. The meditator's mind is not merely calm, it is Zeno-stabilized, held in a state of coherent, integrated, non-fluctuating awareness by the continuous self-observation that the practice cultivates. When you pray with sustained, concentrated, heartfelt attention, you are performing a Zeno measurement on the quantum states of your relationship with the divine. The measurement stabilizes the relationship, holds it in a definite, coherent, experientially real state that the intermittent, distracted, half-hearted prayer cannot produce. The person who prays continuously, who maintains the awareness of the divine presence throughout the day, as Brother Lawrence taught, and as the Islamic practice of muraqabah prescribes, is performing a continuous Zeno measurement on their relationship with God. And the continuous measurement produces a continuous, stable, unfluctuating experience of the divine presence that is not available to the intermittent observer. When you give someone your full, undivided, loving attention, when you listen without distraction, see without judgment, and are present without reservation, you are performing a Zeno measurement on the quantum states of the relationship between your consciousness and theirs. The measurement stabilizes the relationship, deepens the interbrain coherence, increases the shared phi, and produces the experience of genuine connection that the distracted, phone-checking, half-present conversation cannot produce. Your attention is not merely polite, it is constitutive. It is sustaining the relationship at the quantum level through the Zeno mechanism, with a physical efficacy that the physics makes precise. This connects to our investigation of the acceleration of time. If the quality of human attention is degrading, if the digital economy is fragmenting attention, depleting dopamine, and reducing the capacity for the sustained, focused, present moment awareness that the Zeno effect requires, then the quality of the collective human observation is degrading. And the degradation of the observation may produce a degradation of the observed reality, a less stable, less coherent, less temporally rich, less qualitatively defined experience of the world that the reduced observation sustains. The acceleration of time, the fragmentation of experience, the sense that reality is becoming less solid, less reliable, less real. These are the symptoms that a civilization of degraded observers would produce, according to the Quantum Zeno framework. The symptoms are not imaginary. They are the physical consequences of reduced observation quality on the stability of the observed world. And the cure is what every contemplative tradition has always prescribed: the restoration of attention, the training of the observer, the cultivation of the sustained, focused, non-fluctuating, present moment awareness that produces maximum Zeno stabilization, and that the traditions call, in their various languages, mindfulness, contemplation, muraqabah, dharana, and prayer. Every investigation in this series has converged on this conclusion. In our investigation of distance, we learn that space is emergent from entanglement and that the connection is more real than the separation. In our investigation of gravity, we learn that love is the conscious experience of the entanglement that structures the cosmos. In our investigation of grief, we learn that the connection love creates is not destroyed by death. In our investigation of evolution, we learn that the universe is computing toward consciousness. In our investigation of quarks, we learn that isolation is forbidden at every scale. In our investigation of time, we learn that the acceleration of subjective time is caused by the degradation of attention. And now, in this investigation, we have learned that the physical world is sustained by observation, that the continuous attention of a conscious observer is the mechanism that holds reality in being, that the quality of the observation determines the quality of the reality, and that the contemplative practices are not merely psychological techniques, but physical interventions in the observation that sustains the world. The thread that connects all of these investigations is attention. Attention produces temporal landmarks and slows time. Attention generates entanglement and creates connection. Attention performs Zeno measurements and stabilizes reality. Attention is the mechanism by which consciousness participates in the constitution of the physical world. And the degradation of attention, the fragmentation, the distraction, the chronic inattention that the digital economy produces is not merely a cognitive inconvenience. It is a degradation of the mechanism by which conscious beings participate in the sustaining of reality itself. The contemplative traditions have always known this. The Buddhist tradition places sati mindfulness, attention at the center of the path to liberation. The Christian tradition places contemplation sustained, loving attention to God at the summit of the spiritual life. The Islamic tradition places dhikr, continuous, unbroken remembrance, at the heart of the Sufi path. The Hindu tradition places dharana, concentrated attention, at the gateway to samadhi. Every tradition identifies attention as the supreme spiritual faculty, the faculty that connects the human to the divine, the temporal to the eternal, the local to the cosmic. And the Quantum Zeno Effect reveals why. Attention is the mechanism by which consciousness observes, and observation is the mechanism by which reality is sustained. The universe is not a machine that runs by itself. It is a quantum system that is sustained by the continuous observation of a consciousness that does not sleep. The contemplative traditions call this consciousness God. The physics calls it the terminal observer. The panpsychists call it the universal awareness. The name does not matter. What matters is the structure. There is something watching, something that has been watching since the first instant of the universe, something whose continuous attention holds every particle in its state, maintains every structure in its form, and sustains the entire edifice of physical reality against the entropic tendency toward dissolution. And you are part of this watching. Your consciousness is not separate from the cosmic observation. It is a local expression of the cosmic observation, a specific, unique, irreplaceable node in the network of awareness that sustains the world. When you pay attention, when you are fully, completely, unreservedly present to the moment you are living, you are participating in the act that holds the universe in being. You are performing the Zeno measurement. You are sustaining reality, not by yourself, not alone, but as a participant in the cosmic observation that every tradition has described, and that the physics of the Quantum Zeno Effect has, for the first time, given a precise physical mechanism. The Quran says, God does not sleep. The physics says, the observation does not stop. The traditions say, the divine attention is continuous, uninterrupted, and sufficient to sustain all things. And the invitation that every contemplative tradition extends, and that the Quantum Zeno Effect now gives physical content, is this: wake up, pay attention, be present, because the observation matters, your observation matters, and the universe is sustained in part by the quality of the attention you bring to each moment of your conscious life. The watched pot does not boil, the watched universe does not dissolve, and the watched moment does not pass, it deepens, it stabilizes, it becomes more real with each instant of sustained attention. This is what the quarks have always known, what the atoms have always embodied, what the cells have always practiced, what the galaxies have always demonstrated, and what the contemplative traditions have always taught. Reality is sustained by attention, and attention is the gift that consciousness brings to a universe that cannot exist without it. Pay attention. The universe depends on it. The Quantum Zeno Effect began as a technical curiosity, a strange prediction about the behavior of unstable quantum systems under continuous measurement. It has become, through the course of this investigation, something far more profound, a window into the deepest relationship between consciousness and reality, between the observer and the observed, between the divine attention and the physical world it sustains. The watched pot does not boil, the watched atom does not decay, the watched universe does not dissolve, and the watched moment, the moment that receives the full, sustained, undivided attention of a conscious being, does not pass into the blur of forgotten time. It deepens, it stabilizes, it becomes more real, and the consciousness that watches it becomes, in the act of watching, a participant in the cosmic observation that has been sustaining reality since the first instant of the universe. Zeno was right. The arrow, observed at every instant, does not move. The quantum system, measured at every moment, does not decay, and the universe, held in the continuous gaze of the consciousness that pervades it, does not dissolve into the nothing from which it arose. The gaze holds, the attention sustains, and you, in every moment of genuine presence, are part of the holding and part of the sustaining. This is the deepest truth that the Quantum Zeno Effect reveals. Reality is not something that happens to you. Reality is something you sustain through the quality of your attention, through the depth of your presence, through the continuity of your awareness. And the universe, far from being indifferent to your attention, depends on it more than you have ever imagined.